One evening, a military man returned to his residence and discovered his young son huddled in sleep in the corridor just beyond the entrance to their dwelling. What the child held tightly in his grasp brought tears to the father's eyes, and nobody responded to his knocks that night. Where had the boy's mother gone? And why did the youngster murmur words that caused even the courtroom judge to lower his gaze in respect? The evening of autumn had descended, bringing a sharp coldness that seeped through the foliage in the serene small community of Oak Creek. All had settled into its customary tranquility, with faint moonlight cascading over the ancient cobblestone trail that guided Daniel Carter back to the location he had previously regarded as his abode. His aged pickup vehicle, the identical one that had transported him from his military detachment, halted before the house topped with a red roof where he had departed his affections 3 years prior. The light on the veranda remained illuminated, a modest radiance in the darkness that caused Daniel to hesitate briefly. 3 years had passed, and at last he was home again. No telephone communication, no prior notice. He had anticipated a tender astonishment, a spontaneous gathering that was subdued and uncomplicated. He merely desired to behold his spouse, Laura, and their young child, Noah. Daniel deactivated the motor and exited, his attire still bearing remnants of metallic sands, explosive residues, and the passage of time. Hoisting his travel bag onto his shoulder, he gazed at the well-known windows. The planters on the veranda were still tended with water. The lawn beside the path had been neatly mowed, everything appeared ordinary. But then he halted, his heart contracting tightly. Something was amiss. There, on the steps of the veranda, under the gentle illumination, lay a diminutive form curled up, his head supported by a backpack shaped like a dinosaur. Daniel hastened his steps, his pulse racing. That small boy was Noah. He knelt down. Noah was slumbering, clad in a lightweight jacket and scuffed footwear, his small hands firmly grasping something, a tiny wooden key, the same placing key that Daniel had instructed him to craft when he was younger. He had gestured back then. "This is the key to our dwelling, son. Regardless of your location, you'll always navigate your way back." "Noah," Daniel murmured softly, lightly rousing him. Noah's brown eyes gradually parted, bewildered and drowsy. Then, upon recognizing his father's countenance, the boy straightened up. "Dad? Is it truly you?" Daniel grinned, his tone quivering. "It's me, buddy." Noah flung his arms around his father's neck, his petite frame shivering and chilled as he held on tightly. Noah whispered, "I lacked a key. Mommy went to supper with Uncle Ethan. I believed she'd return before I dozed off. I waited, but she said, 'I am a grown boy now. I ought to learn patience.'" Daniel offered no reply. His thoughts spun wildly. Ethan? Who was Ethan? Why was his son resting outdoors on such a frigid evening? He lifted Noah into his embrace and rushed to the main entrance. It remained secured. Daniel pressed the doorbell, no reply. He retrieved his phone. Laura's contact failed to connect. He attempted once more, nothing. The interior lights were active, yet no one approached the door. Daniel remained motionless for an instant, the wind lashing at his collar. It was intensely cold. He clutched Noah nearer and pivoted back to the vehicle. His son had drifted off on his shoulder, weary, frozen, famished. With no alternative, Daniel proceeded to the modest cabin he had leased on the town's outskirts the previous day, merely a provisional arrangement for the initial nights, until he felt prepared to reunite with his family. The cabin was rudimentary: a solitary bed, a timber table, a slender coverlet, and an improvised electric cooker. But at minimum, it was serene. He tenderly placed Noah on the bed, removed his outerwear, and covered him. The boy's hand still clasped the wooden key. Daniel seated himself beside him, observing his son's slumber, his heart constricting with each inhalation. He failed to comprehend the situation. 3 years, and now this. Why was his young boy in such a condition? Who was Ethan? And where had Laura been during all this? Daniel did not rest. He remained beside his son, attuned to Noah's consistent respiration. And what he uncovered subsequently rendered him utterly immobilized. Morning sunlight filtered through the flimsy drape of the wooden cabin. Daniel had not slept. He sat tranquilly on the wooden seat next to the bed where Noah rested beneath the blanket, still holding the wooden key as though it were his sole protection in existence. As the illumination permeated the space more thoroughly, Noah shifted. He blinked several times, disoriented before realizing he was not at his usual home. His gaze shifted to his father, and for the first occasion in what seemed an eternity, Daniel perceived a subtle spark of solace in them. "You're awake?" Daniel inquired softly. Noah assented, his lips still quivering faintly. Daniel decanted warm milk into a plastic vessel and presented it to his son, then positioned himself opposite him. "Noah, may I pose a question?" "It's fine. I simply wish to comprehend." Noah regarded his father, then offered a minor nod. "Has what occurred last night, has that transpired previously? Do you frequently have to linger outside the residence for your mother?" The boy remained quiet for an extended period, then murmured, "Not constantly, but occasionally. I didn't mention anything because Mom instructed not to disturb her. She ventures out frequently with Mr. Ethan. He dislikes children." Daniel tightened his fist beneath the table. "And me? What does your mom say regarding me?" Noah averted his gaze to the ground. "She says you're distant, that you can't look after us. Then she weeps, and Mr. Ethan arrives to console her. Afterward, she told me I should begin referring to him as my new dad. But I refused. I already possess a dad." Daniel rose and proceeded to the window. The sky outdoors was clear, but within, a tempest raged in his heart. 3 years ago, they had consented to a provisional parting during his deployment. Neither had initiated divorce proceedings. There were no assurances, but also no conclusive farewells. And now he had returned, only to discover his son slumbering outdoors and his wife dining with another individual. He turned and softly stroked Noah's hair. "We're returning to the house. I need to converse with your mom. You needn't fret about anything. All right?" Noah nodded. "Are you going to remain permanently this time?" Daniel smiled. "I'm not departing again. I promise." The pickup vehicle arrived before the old residence around 8 the morning. The interior lights were still on, the drapes firmly closed. Daniel grasped Noah's hand and advanced to the door. This time he rapped decisively. A moment later, the door creaked ajar. Laura appeared, attired in a creased silk garment, her hair disheveled. Her expression solidified in absolute astonishment. "Daniel? When did you arrive back?" Daniel ignored that. He regarded her, then gestured to the boy beside him. "Noah slept outdoors on the veranda last night. Were you cognizant of that?" Laura stiffened, her eyes darting to Noah, who stood silently behind his father. Her cheeks reddened. She averted her gaze. "Last night I was out for supper. I didn't consider." "Didn't consider?" "He is 9 years old, Laura. You didn't ponder leaving a child outdoors in the chill?" A man's voice echoed from behind Laura. "What's happening?" A tall man, perhaps in his 42nd, emerged into sight behind her, clad in a rumpled shirt, his hair still moist. Daniel stared at him. "You must be Ethan." Ethan arched an eyebrow. "And you must be Daniel. I've heard much about you." Daniel did not enter. He merely stated, "We'll discuss appropriately later, but commencing now, I wish to see my son daily, and I'd like to know how you intend to justify last night's occurrence before a judge." Laura's countenance paled. "Are you menacing me?" No, I just returned and found my son asleep on a veranda. You determine what that signifies. The atmosphere outside the residence felt denser than ever. Ethan folded his arms, as if prepared to intercede, but Daniel had already pivoted, leading Noah back to the vehicle. "Where are we heading, Dad?" Noah inquired softly. Daniel gave his small hand a comforting press. "Home. At least to a location where I know you'll slumber under a coverlet." The modest wooden cabin received the father and son back in the gentle illumination of late morning. Daniel pushed the door open and guided Noah inside. The area hadn't altered basic, undecorated but cozy. Part of that coziness stemmed from the golden sunlight streaming through the window, the remainder from something Noah couldn't precisely identify, a sensation of security. He roamed quietly around the small chamber, still holding the wooden key in his hand. Daniel poured some orange juice and placed the glass on the table. "Are you famished?" he asked. Noah gave a slight shake of his head, but his eyes remained fixed on his father. Daniel didn't insist further. Instead, he took a few slices of bread and applied peanut butter to them, the variety Noah used to enjoy. When he set the plate on the table, Noah tentatively sat down. They consumed in silence. For the first time in years, Daniel felt as though he was experiencing an ordinary morning, no blasts, no commands, no frigid detachment. Just the subdued sound of mastication, the gentle cadence of his son's breathing, and sunlight resting on the edge of an aged wooden table. Yet, even in that serene instant, recollections surged in like a chilly breeze. They once possessed a home not flawless, but authentic. 3 years ago, when Daniel was stationed abroad, he was the one who proposed a temporary separation so Laura could have greater liberty to tend to their son and establish stability at home. They both vowed to maintain contact, to cling to optimism. But mere months after his departure, the communications dwindled. The conversations grew brief and aloof. A year later, Laura dispatched a concise email. "We should maintain some separation for Noah's benefit. I require time to reflect." Daniel didn't grasp it, but he acquiesced, because he still trusted she would honor her commitment. Now, after all, he knew the genuine reason Laura sought distance wasn't time. It was another man, Ethan. That reality didn't merely wound, it made Daniel feel deprived, not solely of his wife, but of the moments that should have been his and his son's. Something within him shattered. But even in that tranquil morning, observing Noah gradually chew his sandwich, Daniel realized there was still something he could safeguard. After breakfast, Daniel invited Noah out to the front veranda. He carried an old bench to the yard and dusted it off. Noah accompanied, bearing a tattered comic book he'd discovered in his backpack, the sole item he still possessed from home. Daniel sat beside him, opened his toolbox, and commenced minor repairs. "Can I sleep here?" Noah asked casually. "I mean, this place, this cabin." Daniel paused his activity and looked at his son. "If that's what you desire, there's always a spot for you here." The boy nodded. He said nothing further, but his stance eased a bit, one leg swinging lightly, his fingers turning the pages of the book, softly reciting the dialogue to himself. Daniel observed. There was an odd sort of quietness about the boy, not playful, not unburdened. Even as he read, his eyes repeatedly glanced toward Daniel, as if fearing his father might vanish abruptly. Earlier that afternoon, Daniel had laundered Noah's clothes. As the boy changed, Daniel noticed faint marks on his arm, not from strikes, but light contusions, elongated as if from pressure or colliding with something in a confined area. The sleeve cuff was worn. As soon as Noah noticed his father's glance, he swiftly pulled the sleeve down. "What occurred here?" Daniel asked gently. Noah appeared flustered. "Maybe when I crawled under the bed. Uncle Ethan dislikes when I leave my things out, so I tied it quickly." Daniel offered no response, but he recorded every detail mentally. That evening, the two organized a small dresser together and folded garments. Noah added some new sketches to the wall. One depicted a house with an open entrance, another showed an adult and a child standing alongside. Daniel halted when he saw it. "Is that me?" he asked. Noah nodded. "You are opening the door. You didn't make me wait." Daniel turned away, feigning to fold more clothes. He didn't want his son to see the redness in his eyes. That night, Noah retired early. Just before drifting off, he asked quietly, "Will you still be here tomorrow?" Daniel nodded. "I'll be here every day, unless I need to purchase cookies." That elicited a soft chuckle from Noah. He turned his face into the pillow, and for the first time he fell asleep without clasping the wooden key in his hand. Daniel sat at the bed's edge, watching his son sleep. In his mind, a strategy was forming. He required counsel from someone versed in the law. He needed to expose the truth. But before any of that, he had to provide Noah with something profound: the confidence to believe that not every door is barred and not every adult departs and never returns. That tranquil existence they had just started to experience would transform entirely by the following morning. That morning, Daniel escorted Noah back to school. Just before exiting the car, the boy gave his father's hand a gentle squeeze. Daniel leaned down, adjusted his scarf, and reassured him. "Everything's going to be fine. I'll be waiting at the gate afterward." Noah entered, and Daniel proceeded to Miss Amy's office. She welcomed him with an expression of subdued relief. "I am pleased Noah attended school with you today," she said softly. "That boy requires his father's presence." She displayed a drawing Noah had created the prior week: a child huddled by a closed door, heavy snow descending outside. In the distance, the silhouette of an adult walking away, no sunlight, no warmth. Daniel couldn't speak. "I can't confirm for certain," Miss Amy added. "But Noah needs a place that genuinely feels like home, somewhere he knows he's being listened to." Daniel expressed gratitude and departed without further words. But as he reached the school gate, he saw Laura standing beside Ethan and an unknown man. "My lawyer, Rick Hanson," Laura stated flatly. "You should know, under this state's law, without steady employment and a legal residence, you can't retain Noah." Daniel gripped the backpack strap tighter. "The boy was left outside your front door, Laura. What's more unstable than that?" "That was just an unfortunate incident," she retorted swiftly. Ethan interjected, his tone arrogant. "Don't let your personal feelings disrupt Noah's life. We're his real family now." Daniel didn't reply. He knew they held the legal advantage. He lacked employment. The cabin was merely temporary. If it went to court now, he'd lose all. There was a time he had completed divorce documents but never submitted them. Part of him hoped Laura would alter. The other knew if he filed without stability, custody of Noah would escape forever, and that was unacceptable. That afternoon, Daniel walked to Bill's old garage to seek work. "I can't offer much," Bill said, wiping his hands with a cloth. "But if you can manage grease and freezing mornings, you can begin tomorrow." "I can manage it," Daniel responded. "I just need to collect my boy every afternoon." In the ensuing days, his life established a subdued pattern. Days at the garage, afternoons retrieving Noah, evenings solitary in the cabin. The pack of cookies and folded note he left each evening on Laura's doorstep became his sole link to his son. Each day, just one small smile from Noah, and Daniel could persist. One day, he received an invitation to a class reunion. Daniel wavered, but ultimately chose to attend, not to demonstrate anything, but to confront it. The reunion occurred at a spacious restaurant. A few former classmates initiated discussions voicing admiration for his military service. Daniel merely provided a faint smile, speaking little. Then Laura arrived, her arm linked with Ethan's. She approached, her voice louder than needed. "Oh, Daniel, I didn't anticipate you'd come. Aren't you occupied with your single dad responsibilities?" Ethan added with a smirk. "Soldiers are great at combat, lousy at maintaining things. I'm here every day, Laura, and Noah doesn't have to wait." The animated table abruptly quieted. Daniel stood motionless, uttering nothing. But Laura persisted, her eyes shining with smug satisfaction. "I made the right decision. Someone who earns, who constructs a real life, not someone mired in the past, without a home, without a future." Daniel didn't speak. He just regarded them both. No fury in his eyes, only a profound, quiet grief. He placed his glass of water gently on the table, turned, and departed the assembly. That night, he sat in the cabin without activating the lights. Every word he wished to express rested silently on a blank sheet. But he didn't dispatch it. Because words can't repair hardened heart, only deeds can. Daniel inhaled deeply. He wouldn't debate anymore. He would labor, he would watch, he would ready himself, and when the moment arrived, he would reclaim his son not with words, but with a subdued strength no one could refute. After the acrid clash at the front gate on the night Daniel returned, and the harsh insults directed at him by Laura and Ethan, Daniel realized silence was no longer viable. He had secured employment at Bill Harris' garage, a compassionate, empathetic man who owned the establishment. Every day, Daniel toiled relentlessly. His hands became accustomed to the noises of equipment, the odor of lubricant and fuel. He acquired knowledge rapidly, with the determination and orderliness of an experienced soldier. Daniel progressively became one of the most proficient mechanics in the workshop. Mr. Harris frequently commended him and, on multiple occasions, suggested larger repair assignments and possible advancements Daniel could undertake. He knew the path forward was lengthy, but incrementally he was reconstructing a base for himself and for Noah. Still, Noah's welfare stayed a perpetual concern in Daniel's heart. He maintained the practice of collecting Noah after school and depositing small packets of cookies with handwritten messages under Laura's veranda. He observed his son attentively, noting that while the boy smiled more frequently around him, his eyes still bore a persistent melancholy. Every time Daniel escorted him back to Laura's residence, the child appeared like a fragile bloom, fading gradually in a setting where attention and affection were absent. Miss Amy, Noah's educator, regularly messaged Daniel with worries about the boy's emotional condition. She observed he communicated less and less, seldom engaged with peers, and his notebooks were replete with gloomy illustrations. Daniel knew the time had arrived not merely to love quietly, but to proceed within the legal framework. One late autumn evening, rain hammered the cabin's windows in torrents. The wind propelled the drops laterally, and thunder growled in the distance. Daniel sat reading, but his thoughts continually returned to the old residence. He fretted about Noah. Was he drenched in the rain? Had he consumed dinner? Even though Daniel now possessed employment and a consistent shelter, the anxiety for his son never dissipated. Meanwhile, at the old residence, Laura and Ethan were preparing to depart and commemorate a significant business agreement. Ethan, clad in a costly suit, checked his timepiece. "Let's go, Laura. We're going to be tardy." Laura seized her designer handbag and donned her coat. In haste, she was all greens, radiant with the excitement of fresh triumph and the ease of opulence. "Where's Noah?" "He's home by now, right?" she inquired distractedly, her tone indicating she didn't care much for the response. "You said he could manage himself." Ethan shrugged, not even troubling to verify. He's probably in his room. Just secure the door. We don't want him roaming. Laura complied as Ethan instructed. She locked the front door firmly, without once confirming if Noah had indeed returned. She presumed he was inside, secluded in his room as usual. Ethan's luxury vehicle accelerated into the rain, leaving the residence in obscurity amid the sound of precipitation. Neither realized Noah wasn't home. Noah was still outdoors. He had walked home from school that day. Football practice had overrun unexpectedly, and he missed the final bus. The rain had arrived unannounced, and he lacked an umbrella. He endeavored to run, but by the time he arrived at the residence, he was saturated. He reached into his pocket. The key his mother had provided was missing. Somewhere en route, he had misplaced it. Noah stood at the door, shivering from the cold. He called out, "Mom," but no one responded. He knocked, then pounded more forcefully, his tiny fists scarcely audible over the rain. Tears blended with the droplets, cascading down his face. "Mom, Mom, I don't have the key." He continued calling until his voice grew raspy, but the door stayed immobile, cold, unresponsive. The veranda light was on, but the house was silent, not a single noise, not a single indication of life. Noah sank onto the cold front step, clutching his backpack tightly, knees drawn to his chest. He was accustomed to being left solitary, but tonight, under the relentless rain, the isolation and dread struck more intensely than ever. It felt as if the entire world had forsaken him. Daniel, struck by an inexplicable intuition that something was awry, couldn't remain seated in the cabin. His heart signaled trouble. He grabbed his coat, picked up his umbrella, and drove to the old residence. He didn't know what he saw, just an inexplicable tug, an invisible bond linking him to his son. As he turned onto the street, his headlights illuminated a small figure huddled on the steps. Noah! Daniel's heart tightened. He braked abruptly and rushed to his son. "Son, what are you doing here?" He knelt and enveloped his arms around the boy. Noah's body was icy, trembling uncontrollably. Daniel could sense the boy's warm tears soaking into his shoulder, mingling with the freezing rain. He removed his coat and wrapped it snugly around Noah, attempting to warm him. Noah buried himself in his father's embrace, sobbing. "Dad, I didn't have the key. Mom's gone. Please, don't leave again." That plea, feeble, shattered, struck Daniel like a bolt to the core. "Please, don't leave again." That's all the boy desired, not wealth, not a grand residence, just a father, someone who would never forsake him, someone who would always be the open entrance awaiting him. Just then a figure emerged into the light on the veranda. Mrs. Mildred. She had been there the entire time, holding an umbrella, observing. Tears streamed down her benevolent face. She had witnessed it all. Noah abandoned, the frantic knocking, the mother who never appeared. "I can't just observe any more, Daniel," she said, voice quivering but resolute. "This has occurred too frequently. He deserves a father, a genuine home, a home where the door is always ajar for him." She gently placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder, a subdued gesture of backing, of unity. And in that moment, beneath the cold rain, in his father's arms, Noah felt safer than he had in ages. He trusted his dad, utterly a trust that couldn't be rattled. And Daniel knew he couldn't remain silent any longer. Laura and Ethan's harsh words, Noah huddled in the rain, and that desperate plea had driven him to his brink. This was why he had to contend. This was the instant he had to advance fully and openly as a father. Daniel carried Noah into the truck and drove directly back to the cabin. That night, he spent hours warming Noah, narrating tales and soothing the fears that had embedded in the boy. The next morning, while Noah still slumbered soundly, Daniel made his choice. He picked up the phone and dialed the lawyer, Mr. Bill had once suggested a family law specialist named Sarah Chen. "I want custody of my son," Daniel said, his voice steady and unyielding. "And I want fairness. I need you to examine Laura and the man she is residing with. I want to demonstrate that I can be the superior parent, that I am able to give Noah the life he merits. And I vow I'll never allow my boy to endure another night like that again." Under the cold rain of a late autumn night, cradled in his father's warm hold, Noah's fragile plea, "Please don't leave again," was more than a child's lament. It was the ignition that sparked a fierce determination in Daniel. His son's tears, the fear carved deep into that small, weary heart, became the most resounding proclamation of a conflict that could no longer be evaded. Daniel Carter was no longer the silent, enduring father he had been. He now stood erect, unshakable, prepared to confront whatever awaited for Noah, for the day that front door would genuinely open, not just to admit Noah, but to allow love, security, and belonging to flourish. And reign ever since that cold, rainy night when Noah tearfully implored Dad, "Please don't go again." Daniel knew he couldn't postpone a single instant longer. The call to his lawyer was the initial step, signifying his shift from a quietly anguished father into a resolute combatant. He commenced gathering proof, recording every occasion when Noah was left unattended, every harsh word Laura and Ethan had directed at the boy. Mr. Bill, from the auto garage, along with their neighbor Mrs. Mildred, became subdued but steadfast allies of Daniel. They had observed more than sufficient. Yet before any legal measures could commence, Daniel persisted in his daily regimen of retrieving Noah after school, ensuring his son was secure and felt nurtured. He continued depositing little bags of cookies and handwritten notes under Laura's veranda, a silent cue of a presence that couldn't be obliterated. One weekend afternoon, as Daniel awaited school dismissal, he spotted Laura and Ethan already positioned at the gate. Laura, as ever, was impeccably attired. Ethan wore dark sunglasses, hiding that familiar icy stare. A sinking sensation overwhelmed Daniel. Laura approached Noah with a forced smile. "Noah, tonight you're dining with me and Uncle Ethan. We're going to Blue River Restaurant. Uncle Ethan has some thrilling news to share." Noah looked at Daniel, then back at his mother, his eyes brimming with doubt. Daniel knew Noah didn't wish to go, but the boy couldn't muster the courage to refuse his mom. Daniel simply patted his son's head gently. "Go on, I'll return to the cabin." Dinner transpired at the upscale Blue River restaurant, where the tinkling of cutlery merged with the gentle buzz of dialogues. Laura and Ethan sat opposite Noah. Throughout the meal, Ethan boasted incessantly about his new ventures and recent accomplishments. Laura laughed brightly, as if performing to prove she'd chosen correctly. "Noah," Ethan said, his tone grave as he placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, "I've got a major project upcoming. If it succeeds, you and your mom will have an even superior life. You see, I've always desired the best for this family." Laura smiled and nodded affirmatively. "Uncle Ethan loves you and me very much, Noah. He's the best father you could have." Ethan turned to Noah, the smile on his face somewhat contrived. "That's correct. You should call me Dad now, Noah. I'm your new father. Look at your mom. She's found joy again. And I'll be the one guiding this family." He intentionally elevated his voice sufficiently for adjacent tables to overhear. Noah remained silent. He lowered his head, his tiny hands clenched under the table, his throat constricted. Call Ethan Dad, the man who caused his mother to overlook him, the man who coldly regarded him when he was left outside shivering. His true father, Daniel, was the one who always awaited him, who left cookies on the veranda, who held him close that freezing, rainy night. Seeing Noah still quiet, Laura nudged his leg under the table. "Noah, say something. Uncle Ethan is addressing you." Ethan raised an eyebrow, evidently annoyed. What's the matter, Noah? Don't you like me? I've tried really hard to be a good father to you. His tone carried a subtle menace. Noah felt as if his chest was being compressed. He slowly raised his head, eyes red from restraining tears. I already have a dad, he said, his voice quivering but resolute. My dad would never lock me out of the house. The entire restaurant seemed to halt. Cutlery clinking ceased. Several diners turned their heads. Ethan Blake abruptly slammed his hand on the table. Noah, what are you talking about? The glass on the table shook, nearly overturning. Laura's face paled. She quickly grasped Noah's hand, trying to pull the boy to his feet. That's enough, Noah. You're being absurd. She yanked him from the chair without acknowledging the surrounding people. Don't touch my son. Daniel Carter appeared. He had been at the restaurant's entrance, having observed the whole scene. He hadn't intended to overhear. An old acquaintance had invited him for coffee at a cafe across the street, and he had seen Laura and Ethan enter with Noah. Something in his instinct told him trouble was afoot, so he followed. Ethan and Laura stared at Daniel in disbelief. Laura stammered, what are you doing here? Daniel didn't answer her. He locked eyes with Ethan, his gaze keen and cold, reminiscent of his military days. Let go of my son. Noah isn't your possession. You don't get to treat him however you please. Embarrassed and enraged at being exposed in such an uncomfortable moment, Laura hastily dragged Noah toward the door. She practically hauled him, ignoring the inquisitive looks from other patrons. You've humiliated me so badly, Laura hissed. Her forced smile vanished, replaced by a flushed, angry face. If I have to choose between a house with a closed door and a father who's always waiting for me, I choose that. Noah's voice trembled with tears as Laura pulled him out of the restaurant. His words were soft, but they resonated across the room like a proclamation. It was the first time he had openly selected his father, choosing unconditional love over falsehood and disregard. Daniel watched his son being dragged away, his chest tightening with feeling. He knew Noah had borne far too much. The boy had suppressed it all for too long, and now he had finally erupted. This confrontation was a pivotal moment. Daniel clenched his fists. He would not permit anyone to harm Noah again. The struggle for his son, for equity, had just become more pressing than ever. Noah's direct declaration at the Blue River restaurant. If I had to choose between a house with a closed door and a father who's always waiting for me to come home, I'd choose that, kept resounding in Daniel's mind. It wasn't merely a sincere affirmation of his son's affection. It was an ultimate cry for assistance, one that propelled Daniel to act more resolutely. He had witnessed enough of Laura and Ethan's coldness and brutality. It was time for justice to prevail. The very next morning, Daniel visited the law office Miss Amy, Noah's teacher, had suggested. It was a small office on a peaceful street with an aged, weathered sign reading Carter and Associates Law. He was met by a young attorney with a composed manner and keen eyes. Her name was Sarah Chen. She listened attentively to Daniel's account, never interjecting, taking meticulous, detailed notes. Daniel recounted everything. His 3 years in the military. The fact that Laura had never legally divorced him, yet was openly cohabiting with Ethan Blake. How Noah had been abandoned on the veranda. The insults he had suffered, and finally the clash at the restaurant. He also submitted the evidence he had quietly amassed, including a brief video clip that Mrs. Mildred had recorded of Ethan shouting at Noah, along with some of Noah's dawdle drawings that mirrored his sorrow and seclusion. So, Laura and Ethan are living together as if married, even though you're still legally wed to her? Sarah asked, underlining a few lines in her notebook. And they publicly demeaned you, claiming you're unsuitable to raise your child due to your financial status. Daniel nodded, the burden in his chest intensifying. I want custody of Noah. I want my son to have a secure life and to truly feel cherished. Sarah looked at him with both compassion and firm determination. All right, Mr. Carter. We'll commence from here. Legally, Laura residing with another man before finalizing a divorce could disadvantage her in a custody proceeding, but will require solid proof of her negligence and Ethan's indifference toward Noah. Most crucially, we'll need evidence of your financial competence. I'm employed at Bill's garage, Daniel said. The compensation isn't substantial, but it's sufficient for me to lease a cabin and supply Noah with essentials. Sarah nodded. We'll need more than that for the court to trust you can provide Noah a stable existence. We'll require a clear financial history, and I think we should also examine Laura and Ethan's financial position more closely. The young attorney initiated her inquiry immediately. She requested Daniel to furnish every piece of information he had about Laura and Ethan, including full names, addresses, occupations, and any details about Ethan's business affairs. A few weeks later, Daniel received a call from Sarah. Her voice sounded more grave than usual. Mr. Carter, we've examined the bank accounts and financial records under Laura Jenkins' name, Sarah said. There are several anomalies. A large sum of money has been transferring in and out of those accounts, and the transactions don't align with Laura's typical earnings. Daniel furrowed his brow. What kind of anomalies? These transactions are executed from various locations, even foreign IP addresses. What's more concerning is that they connected to dummy real estate projects or property, shifts at prices well below market value. We suspect this indicates money laundering, and it seems Ethan Blake may be using Laura's name to hide these unlawful activities. Daniel was astonished. He recalled a time when Ethan had bragged to Laura, I'm precise with paperwork. No one's ever detected a single error in my records. As it emerged, that so-called precision was merely a facade for criminal conduct. And what was even more disturbing, Laura, listed as the account holder, appeared entirely unaware that she might be an unwitting accomplice. Even if unintentionally, she had been manipulated by Ethan, caught in a vortex of money and aspiration without perceiving the larger scheme. She was just a pawn in Ethan's complex scheme. Meanwhile, on another aspect, Dr. Leah Morgan, a child psychologist, had continued her sessions with Noah at the suggestion of his teacher, Miss Amy. Gradually, Noah began to confide in Dr. Leah. He spoke of his fears of sleeping alone, the solitude of dining by himself, and the sense of desertion he felt when his mother became engrossed in her life with Ethan. Dr. Leah noted indications of mild psychological injury in Noah, but she also observed a notable enhancement since Daniel's return. The boy had begun to smile more frequently, create brighter images, and voice a clear wish to be with his father. The psychological assessment, meticulously compiled by Dr. Leah, would act as a vital piece of evidence in court, illustrating how detrimental Noah's current surroundings had been to his mental health. The battle for Noah was no longer solely about reclaiming a father's rights. It had unlocked a concealed portal, drawing Daniel into a labyrinth of hidden plots. Piece by piece, the young attorney's discoveries were unveiling a much darker reality. Ethan Blake was crafting an elaborate network of deceit, and Laura, blinded by desire and a desperate quest for joy, had unknowingly become a piece in his game. In this tempest of riches and falsehoods, the destiny of Noah, of Daniel, and even of Laura would soon be determined on the balances of justice, a battle Daniel knew he could not afford to forfeit. Daniel's decisive call to attorney Sarah Chen signified the start of a challenging new phase. In the weeks that ensued, Sarah's humble law office became Daniel's stronghold. The young lawyer labored indefatigably, collaborating with Daniel and Dr. Leah Morgan to assemble every fragment of evidence possible from Mrs. Mildred's account to Noah's illustrations, and even dubious financial trails linked to Ethan Blake. Concurrently, Daniel worked unceasingly to steady his own finances, accepting extended shifts at Mr. Bill's garage to prove he was fully able to care for his son. On the day of the custody hearing, the whole town of Oak Creek seemed to pause in anticipation. News of the case had circulated rapidly, not only because it involved a returning serviceman and a disloyal mother, but because the tale of young Noah's neglect had moved many souls. The small courtroom was crowded. Inquisitive gazes, nervous looks, and even some severe critical stares, all directed at Daniel, Laura, and Ethan. When Judge Maria Bell entered, the whispers subsided to quiet. She was a woman in her mid-52nd with silver hair neatly arranged, her eyes acute, but her expression serene and empathetic. A former esteemed lawyer, she had built a reputation for equity and always placing children's welfare first. The hearing started. Laura's attorney spoke initially. She depicted Daniel as a soldier who had forsaken his family for 3 years, financially unsteady, with no firm home for his child. She stressed that Laura was a natural mother, maintained a regular job, though oblivious to what truly underlay that job, and that Ethan Blake was a prosperous entrepreneur ready to offer Noah a life of ease and safety. Laura then testified. Her voice shook, but it was evident the anxiety was practiced, the assurance contrived. "Your Honor," she said, "I've had to nurture our son alone for the past 3 years. Daniel departed without a word, without funds, and now he returns jobless, without shelter, and asserts he wants to care for Noah. I'm the only one who can provide Noah a stable future, something Daniel simply cannot." She strived to portray herself as a dedicated mother, injured by her husband's abandonment. Then it was Daniel's turn, with Sarah Chen beside him. Sarah began with a clear summary of the couple's legal marital status and the reality that Laura had been living with Ethan before any divorce was filed. She presented proof that Daniel had been discreetly supporting and connecting with Noah since his return. Small packets of cookies, handwritten messages, school collections. "Your Honor," Sarah stated firmly, "this isn't a discussion about money. It's about emotional security, about the environment a child needs to mature healthily. We have psychological assessments from Dr. Leah Morgan, who has personally advised Noah Carter." Dr. Leah Morgan, composed and expert, testified. She explained the mental damage Noah had suffered due to his mother's inattention and Ethan Blake's emotionally remote conduct. She emphasized signs of anxiety, mild despondency, and a profound longing in Noah to bond with his father. "And Your Honor," Sarah proceeded, her voice steady but laden with feeling, "we have one additional piece of evidence, a truth directly from this child's heart." She held up a carefully folded sheet of aged paper. It was a brief composition Noah had penned for his teacher, Miss Amy. Sarah read it aloud. "If I could choose someone to walk with me through the dark, I'd choose Dad because Dad didn't forget me outside the door." Her voice quivered slightly as she uttered the words. The courtroom fell completely silent. Next, Ethan Blake ascended to the witness stand. He was impeccably dressed and conducted himself with poise. "Your Honor, I've done my utmost to be a good father to Noah," he commenced. "I've supplied him with a comfortable existence, a warm and stable family. Daniel Carter has been an irresponsible parent. I truly believe Noah should stay with Laura and me." He attempted to present himself as a reliable and accountable man, but then Sarah Chen produced a stack of further documents. "Your Honor," she said, "we have evidence that Mr. Ethan Blake utilized Laura Jenkins' name to establish fraudulent bank accounts linked to illegal real estate dealings, some showing indications of money laundering. These documents have been forwarded to the relevant authorities for additional probe." The courtroom erupted into a low murmur. Ethan Blake's face blanched, though he endeavored to stay composed. Laura, conversely, was astounded. She stared at Ethan in complete incredulity. She had no inkling any of this was occurring. Finally, Judge Maria Bell looked directly at Noah, seated beside Daniel. "Noah Carter, would you like to say anything?" Noah, typically a quiet and reserved boy, slowly raised his head. He looked at Daniel, then at Laura, and finally met Judge Bell's eyes. The courtroom became utterly silent. Noah took a deep breath. His voice was young and soft. But in the courtroom's stillness, every word resounded clear and true. I don't need someone wealthy. I don't want someone who's only there when things are enjoyable. I want someone who doesn't let me sleep outside in the rain. I just want someone who remembers to open the door when I come home." Noah's words pierced directly to the heart of everyone present. The silence was profound. A few women wiped tears. Even Judge Bell nodded slightly, her eyes shimmering with emotion. The simple truth from a child's heart had exposed everything. Daniel drew Noah into a firm embrace, tears flowing freely down his cheeks. It was a moment when justice wasn't merely inscribed in law but articulated through the unfiltered honesty of a child's voice. Noah's sincere words in court created ripples throughout the room. Everyone there, from Judge Maria Bell to the local residents observing, felt the raw burden of a child's forsaken love and his yearning for a genuine, stable home. Daniel held Noah tightly, tears cascading down his face, a blend of delight and immense relief. He knew in that instant that justice had started to favor him. Immediately following the hearing, attorney Sarah Chen acted swiftly. She transmitted all documents concerning Ethan Blake's suspected money laundering to higher federal investigators. The evidence she had collected from fraudulent bank accounts under Laura's name to dubious real estate transactions was evident and undeniable. Just days later, a shocking report disseminated across Oak Creek faster than the breeze. Ethan Blake, the refined, successful entrepreneur once viewed as the epitome of prosperity and success, had been apprehended at the very residence he shared with Laura. Federal agents raided the property, performed a comprehensive search, and confiscated numerous essential documents. He was accused of fraud, identity, misuse for money laundering, and various other financial offenses. The news stunned the entire town. Many couldn't fathom that Ethan Blake, the man they once respected, had concealed such a shadowy and deceptive existence. Laura Jenkins, entirely unaware of Ethan's illicit actions, stood petrified in shock as she watched her partner being restrained and removed. Her eyes widened, her face colorless, as the officers led him out. Ethan didn't even glance her way. "You'd better handle yourself, Laura," he said coldly, his tone sharp and devoid of feeling, lacking concern, lacking remorse. "Don't expect me to assist you. It's all yours now." His brutal words hit Laura like a blow to the face. She collapsed, sobbing, begging him, desperately attempting to clarify that she had no awareness of the accounts or the plots. But it was too late. Though she wasn't criminally indicted due to insufficient direct proof of her knowing involvement in the laundering, her name was deeply implicated. All joint holdings with Ethan, including bank accounts and investments under her name, were suspended for investigation. The repercussions for Laura didn't conclude there. Ethan's scandal pulled her down too. She was promptly dismissed from her employment, her standing ruined, her financial affairs under examination. Friends who once envied her for securing an affluent, successful companion now distanced themselves, avoiding her as if she were impending trouble. Laura became a woman bereft of everything: her reputation, her profession, her funds, even the man she had forfeited all for all vanished. A few weeks later, the conclusive court hearing occurred. Judge Maria Bell examined all the evidence: Noah's testimony, Dr. Leah's psychological report, the records illustrating Laura's neglect, and most significantly, the documentation of Ethan's illegal pursuits. In the end, the decision was unambiguous. Daniel Carter was awarded full custody of Noah. The court concluded that Daniel was the parent most suitable to provide a safe, emotionally balanced, and physically protected setting for the boy, prioritizing Noah's welfare above all. The old residence that once belonged to Daniel and Laura, the one where Noah had resided, was officially granted to Daniel. The court determined that Daniel had acquired the property prior to the marriage, and Laura had no legal entitlement to any portion of it. Laura Jenkins was mandated to leave the home. She was prohibited from direct interaction with Noah without sanction and oversight from a court-designated third party or certified therapist until she could furnish adequate proof of enhanced conduct and mental stability. The verdict struck Laura like lightning. She stood immobilized in the courtroom, her face ashen, no tears remaining. Everything had disintegrated. One weekend afternoon, Daniel returned to the old residence to finalize the handover. Noah accompanied him. From afar, Daniel saw Laura standing silently at the front gate, her vacant eyes fixed on the home she was about to forfeit. She appeared slimmer, her hair unkempt a stark contrast to the refined, assured woman she once was. She glanced at Noah, regret shadowing her gaze. The boy's words still reverberated in her mind. I don't choose a person who's there when I'm happy. I choose the one who doesn't let me sleep outside when it rains. I just want someone who remembers to open the door when I come home. Tears began to flow down her hollow cheeks, not from rage or disgrace, but from a profound, burning remorse. It was the grief of someone who had just comprehended they had lost the most valuable thing, a son and a true home. Her lips parted, attempting to utter his name, but no sound emerged. She couldn't summon the will to step forward. She knew she no longer merited it. In that moment, Laura fully understood the ruinous cost of her erroneous choices, the price of obliviousness, of prioritizing material riches over love, of turning away from her own child. She merely stood there, observing Noah from a distance, as if he were a remote memory she no longer had the privilege to grasp. Daniel said nothing. He simply took Noah's hand and led him inside. The house was theirs now. The sense of justice served was intertwined with a subdued pain. A pain for a woman who had wandered too far astray and realized it too tardily to reverse. Winter had come to the town of Oak Creek, ushering in brisk winds and the season's initial snowfall that covered rooftops in white, but inside Daniel's red-tiled residence, a fresh kind of warmth was spreading, dissolving the remaining chill of the past. After the court's decision, Daniel devoted all his time and heart to restoring their home. He repainted the white picket fence and planted new bunches of geraniums along the front veranda. The once weary kitchen now shone with firelight, filled with the reassuring aroma of simple dishes, meals made with affection. Noah had formally moved in with Daniel, and the boy's life had altered entirely. No more afternoons filled with dread, fearing he'd be overlooked outside. No more quiet, solitary suppers. Now, his days started with breakfast prepared by his father, proceeded with warm rides home in the afternoon, and concluded with evenings of reading and board games together. Daniel still labored at Bill Harris's garage, and the elderly proprietor always accommodated his timetable. He knew Daniel needed time for his son. One serene winter afternoon, as snowflakes started to descend softly, Noah walked home from school with his familiar dinosaur backpack over one shoulder. But this time, there was no fear, no reluctance in his strides. He paused at the front veranda and reached into his coat pocket. From it, he withdrew a small wooden key, its edges worn, slightly chipped. It was a toy key Daniel had assisted him in carving when he was very young. It wasn't metal and couldn't unlock any door, but to Noah, it was more treasured than any actual key. It symbolized home, safety, and a love that would never ever bar him out. Noah inserted the wooden key into the lock and turned it gently. The familiar creak of the wooden door resounded softly as it opened. A surge of warmth and the sweet fragrance of cinnamon waffles enveloped him. Inside, Daniel sat in the kitchen by the glowing fireplace, reading an old book. The soft yellow light from the table lamp cast a gentle radiance on his face, which now bore less of the fatigue it once did, replaced by a quiet sense of peace and satisfaction. Hearing the door, Daniel looked up. He smiled a kind, warm smile. "You're home, Noah. I made your favorite waffles." Noah said nothing. He ran straight to his father and threw his arms around him, burying his face in Daniel's chest. Daniel held him close, absorbing the warmth and calm of that small, familiar body. Between them, no words were necessary, just a glance, a breath, the simple presence of each other. That was the language of unconditional love. That evening, father and son shared dinner at the kitchen table. The scent of waffles, steam from hot tea, and the soft crackling of firewood in the hearth filled the room. Everything was simple, yet brimming with joy. Noah recounted his day at school to his dad, about new friends he'd made. Daniel listened, smiling occasionally, reaching out to gently tousle his son's hair. After dinner, while Noah assisted in cleaning, Daniel opened a small drawer in the kitchen. From it, he retrieved a small framed glass piece. Inside was an old, yellowed paper. It was the very first note he had written to Noah. The night he quietly left cookies on the veranda. "I'm here always." Daniel carefully positioned the frame on the shelf, right where Noah could view it daily. A few days later, a letter arrived at Daniel's house, stamped with the court's official mark. Daniel opened it. It was a brief note from Judge Maria Bell. She wrote, "Dear Mr. Daniel Carter, I'm writing this letter to extend my heartfelt gratitude. Your case with Noah Carter was not merely a legal matter. It was a profound lesson in fatherhood and resilience. You have helped us not only hear a child's voice, but truly witness the power of unconditional love. I wish you and Noah nothing but the very best on the journey ahead." Daniel smiled softly. He folded the letter and placed it gently on the table. Then he looked out the window, where snow continued to fall. Noah was outside, laughing and playing in the yard with Lily, the neighbor's daughter. They were constructing a snowman together. The sound of Noah's laughter echoed through the crisp winter air. That night, as Daniel tucked Noah into bed, the boy whispered, "Dad, I am not afraid of falling asleep anymore." Daniel gently stroked his son's hair. "Why is that, son?" Noah nestled into his father's arms, his voice full of trust and peace. "Because I have the key, and because this is my home now. You'll never lock the door on me again." Daniel held his son tightly, tears streaming down his face, not of sorrow, but of joy. The old house, once an emblem of fracture and loneliness, had truly become a home. A home didn't need wealth or luxury. All it required was a father whose heart remained open, and a door that was never locked. The journey of mending had concluded, leaving a tale of love, patience, and justice, warm as the aroma of cinnamon waffles wafting through a small kitchen on a winter morning. And so the story of Daniel and Noah Carter reached its close not with a fanciful flourish, but with a quiet, honest recovery, as simple and true as life itself. The little house in Oak Creek was no longer just four walls and a roof. It was a true home where love and presence would never be missing. Daniel, once a soldier returning with unseen scars, had discovered life's deepest significance in becoming the steady foundation for his son. And Noah, the boy who once huddled alone on a veranda, now stood tall, confidently opening the door to a future filled with warmth and hope. This story reminds us that happiness doesn't reside in material splendor or contrived bonds. It lies in patience, forgiveness, and the unconditional love of hearts like Daniel's hearts that quietly sow seeds of hope. Mrs. Mildred and Miss Amy demonstrated that sometimes a single glance of understanding or a timely word of encouragement possesses extraordinary strength. They taught us that a true father or mother isn't the one who bestows riches, but the one who never bars the door to their child, no matter the situation. On the other hand, Laura illustrated the cost of obliviousness and apathy. In pursuing superficial allure and hollow vows, she lost the most precious thing her son's love and trust. Her life became an agonizing lesson about the repercussions of placing material things above family ties. And people like Ethan Blake, concealing behind a veneer of virtue while weaving lies and schemes, ultimately could not evade justice. His network of deceit was revealed, proof that no wrongdoing endures eternally. How many hearts did Daniel and Noah's story affect? Have you ever seen a child yearning to be loved, to be heard? And in your own life, have you ever felt that one small deed, one quiet presence, had more restorative power than 1,000 words? Let us carry these stories of compassion and family love forward, so that every child in this world may hold their own key and always find a door left open, waiting for them to come home.